James Ezimoha. You're watching African News. Let's see your headlines. Confirmed Ebola cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda have topped 600, with death toll rising to more than 100. Ghana says it has rehabilitated 23,000 hectares of degraded forest land. And Uganda is moving closer to becoming an oil producer, but fuel prices remain high. Now, the Ebola outbreak in Africa is becoming increasingly difficult to contain, according to reports. Health authorities are warning that shortages of resources, insecurity, and growing international travel restrictions could complicate efforts to stop the virus from spreading.
Health authorities in Africa are facing growing challenges in containing the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda, as the number of confirmed cases has surpassed 600 and the death toll has climbed above 100. According to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the vast majority of infections have been recorded in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where dozens of new cases continue to be reported. Uganda, meanwhile, has not recorded any new confirmed infections in the latest reporting period. The Centers for Disease Control warns that response efforts are being hampered by serious operational constraints, including insecurity, shortages of ambulances and medical supplies, deteriorating health facilities, and poor road infrastructure. In some affected areas, health centres lack clean water, protective equipment, and decontamination materials. Officials have also highlighted community mistrust as a major obstacle to containment efforts, complicating surveillance, contact tracing, and public health interventions. The United States has urged European countries to consider travel restrictions for people who have recently visited affected countries after Washington imposed its own entry measures covering the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Uganda, and South Sudan. US officials say the restrictions are intended to prevent the spread of the virus, while the Africa CDC has expressed concern that travel measures imposed despite international health guidance could negatively affect response operations.
Now, controlling the outbreak is something people in Kenya are also calling for after a planned U.S. Ebola quarantine facility in the country became the center of growing controversy, triggering protests, legal challenges, and public debate. Here's more.
Police in Kenya fired tear gas and detained several protesters on Tuesday as opposition continued to grow over a U.S.-backed Ebola quarantine center near the town of Nanyuki. Many residents opposed the project, arguing that Kenya should not bear the risks linked to an Ebola outbreak affecting parts of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda. Moreover, tensions over the plan escalated last week, leading to the deaths of 2 protesters.
Is that correct?
The center is being built at Laikipia Air Base near Nanyuki. It would be able to accommodate up to 50 people. U.S. officials say it is intended for Americans who have been exposed to Ebola but are not showing symptoms. Anyone who develops symptoms would be transferred elsewhere for treatment. The project has also sparked a legal dispute. The Kenyan High Court judge has twice ordered the government to halt construction and operations at the site. Lawyers challenging the plan say the government failed to meet the latest court deadline. However, President William Ruto has defended the project, saying last week that his administration is doing the right thing. The United States says it is aware of the court challenge and is working with Kenyan authorities to address concerns. Washington has also pledged $13.5 million to support Kenya's Ebola preparedness efforts. The facility is being planned as Ebola cases continue to rise in eastern Congo and Uganda, where more than 500 infections and over 100 deaths have been reported since the outbreak was declared last month. U.S. military aircraft have continued bringing personnel and equipment to the site despite court orders aimed at stopping the project, with additional temporary structures appearing at the airbase. Kenyan officials say the center could also serve Kenyan and foreign nationals, although U.S. authorities have not confirmed that.
In South Africa, at least 12 people were killed and 9 others injured after gunmen opened fire at an informal settlement east of Johannesburg on Tuesday evening. Police say more than 10 suspects arrived in a white Toyota Quantum, entered the settlement from 2 access points and opened fire before fleeing the scene. A manhunt is underway while the motive for the attack remains unknown. Authorities say they cannot yet confirm whether the shooting was linked to illegal mining activities. Marine ecosystems around the world are facing growing pressure from overfishing and the loss of key species. In South Africa, conservation groups and educators are working to encourage more responsible seafood choices and protect vulnerable shark populations.
South Africa is increasing efforts to promote sustainable seafood consumption and reduce overfishing. Shark populations are falling because of overfishing and habitat loss. Experts say this threatens marine biodiversity and could harm the fishing industry.
So if sharks were to decline, and what we're going to see with that is just a massive increase in other species that are then going to predate on fish stocks, which would have a direct impact on us as humans.
Studies show that more than 1/3 of the world's shark and ray species face the risk of extinction. Fewer sharks could lead to an increase in other marine species, putting greater pressure on fish stocks. To help tackle the problem, South Africa has introduced the Southern African Sustainable Seafood Initiative. The program aims to raise public awareness and reduce pressure on marine ecosystems.
It works on like a color system. So we have green for good, you are more than welcome to eat it. They are caught with sustainable methods. Orange, which is stay clear away from it, but it's not a no-go. And then red, which is completely stay away from. The method in which they are caught is usually like bottom trawlers, and bottom trawlers completely destroy the ecosystems.
The Two Oceans Aquarium in Cape Town also runs educational tours and programs on marine conservation. The initiative aims to encourage young people and their families to make more sustainable seafood choices.
Now, Ghana says it is making progress in restoring degraded forests, with more than 23,000 hectares of damaged land brought back under rehabilitation programs last year. Officials say new surveys show encouraging survival rates for planted trees, though results vary across the country.
Ghana is continuing efforts to restore forests and degraded landscapes as part of wider environmental protection plans. In 2025, more than 23,600 hectares of deforested and damaged land were put under restoration through enrichment planting and forest plantation development. The program is aimed at rebuilding forest cover, protecting biodiversity and improving resilience in areas affected by land degradation. Officials say a recent survey of forest reserves showed tree survival rates of between 65% and 85% in the high forest zone. In the northern savanna zone, where conditions are more difficult, survival rates ranged from 40% to 78%. Authorities say the figures point to progress, but also show the need for continued monitoring and maintenance.
In 2025, a total of 23,600 hectares of deforested and degraded landscapes across the country were put under restoration through enrichment planting and forest plantation development. A recent survival survey conducted in forest reserves within the 2025 T4L planted areas presented a success range of between 65% to 85% survival success in the high forest zone and 40 to 78% in the northern savanna zone.
So bring it. Oh, Charlie, you just put a shot. Come on.
Now, Senegal is drawing attention to the growing strain on its Atlantic coastline, where marine resources are essential to daily life, food security, and the national economy.
Senegal is marking World Oceans Day with warnings that overfishing, pollution, and climate change are threatening the coastal communities that depend on the Atlantic Ocean. Fishing is one of the country's most important industries, supporting around 600,000 people along the coast and supplying both local and export markets. The sector contributes more than 3% to national GDP and provides around 53,000 direct jobs, with many more linked to artisanal fishing and processing. Fish and seafood are also central to Senegal's diet, accounting for about 43% of animal protein consumption. Coastal fisheries make up most of the country's catch and remain vital to exports and employment, but environmental groups say they are under increasing pressure. The Coastal Fisheries Initiative is working with Senegalese stakeholders to improve fisheries management, restore mangroves, and support more sustainable fishing practices.
Now, Uganda is moving closer to becoming an oil-producing nation, but fuel prices remain high and continue to affect everyday life in the country. In Kampala, rising transport and living costs are putting pressure on both households and businesses.
Uganda is preparing to become an oil-producing country, but fuel prices remain high, causing public concern. In Kampala, people say rising fuel costs are increasing transport, food and overall living expenses. Expectations that local oil production would lower prices have not yet been met. Business owners say higher fuel prices are increasing transport costs, which is pushing up the price of goods.
The increase in fuel has affected me in that most items I need to buy for home, for office, and even my travels, there's an increase in the costs, in my expenditure. Because now if I have to move to home, I used to use fuel of around 50,000 per week. Now I have to put like 80,000 per week. An extra movement also impacts on my financial abilities.
Government officials say Uganda's fuel prices are reasonable compared with neighbouring countries. They add that recent increases are mainly due to global market changes. Uganda plans to start its first oil production in mid or late 2026.
The increase and rise in fuel prices has really affected us so much. In that, we used to bring goods from Nairobi at a certain price. We used like 3.5 million, but currently we are using like 4.5. That is really a big margin. In that, when you bring the goods and put them into the market, that cost that is being put in or that increases, it affects the buyers. So it is really affecting us to convince the customers that the fuel prices are high, the prices can't be normal as they used to be. So to stay in a business, you also have to do a certain increase in the price that you used to sell.
So most of the border towns that we have as Uganda obviously had that crisis and shortage. Sometimes they didn't have fuel at all because of the competitive prices Uganda had. If you compared fuel at our pump prices compared to Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, we had a very, very favorable price because government buys the fuel itself. We knew how much we bought it at. We know how much we are selling it to the oil marketing company. So we wouldn't expect Total to sell at a very unreasonable price, yet we know how much we sold to you at. So we are able to monitor and manage pricing of fuel in that manner. However, the orders we made post-conflict, obviously we're selling at higher price, not just because there was scarcity at the moment, but also the dollar rate changed or exchange rate changed because of the war, but also the freight cost went up because now we were no longer bringing fuel from nearby, from the Middle East. We're going further off to India, to Singapore, to West Africa. And remember, much as we're in Africa, West Africa, in terms of transportation, is further away. If you look at the waterways, it's a longer distance to get fuel to Uganda from West Africa. So those costs went up automatically because of the war and the distance. The insurance cost also went up. It means we are purchasing at a higher price. Government is in business. UNOC is the business arm of government. So we are selling. We're not going to sell at a loss, and we're not giving subsidies because we have reduced on our borrowing. We must generate our own income. Now, one of the ways government of Uganda generates income is through its business arm like UNOC.
The Tilenga project, operated by Total Energies, and the Kingfisher project, operated by Kinnock, are expected to produce up to 230,000 barrels of oil per day. However, experts say fuel prices are unlikely to fall soon because the country does not yet have a refinery.
All right, that's all we have today on Africa News. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.